Fired up? What? Fired up, man. Look at that damage. Ah, shit. I kind of wanted to play my breath, but all people want is more fire. Burn, baby, burn. Listen, man, you know you won't be OP forever, right? Wait, what? you smell that? It smells like NERFS. Nah, man, you playing. Fire is lit and will always be lit. Was lit in 8.3 is lit now. Get the fuck out of here. I will be fired up forever. Yeah. Hey, tell this to the bucket of balance changes, you fool. No, But you know what doesn't need to cool off? Our segues. God damn it. You know what time it is? It's time for those subscribe and notifications enabling reminders, because that is how YouTube works nowadays. And actually YouTube hasn't worked really well for WoW content creators in the last couple of months. So it's a little bit sad, guys. Not that sad. It's all right. It could be better, but you know. But actually, it does really help us out if you do hit that little thumbs up-y, subscribe-y, and bell thingy. So I guess it's like 3 things you need to click. It does push the video to more people. It does tell YouTube that you like our stuff so you can get other things that we do, because obviously these are not guides. We do have tier lists, we have podcasts, we have streams, we have other things in the future as well. So click those, all of those thingies, and let's fucking talk some Fire Mage, man. My, how the mighty have fallen. I'm just kidding. But I do have some beef when it comes to Fire Mage, and it may surprise you that it's probably not what you think. First, let's actually take a look at what the current content, upcoming patches, changes, things are for 9.1. Who am I kidding? It's NERFS, people. NERFS. Flamestrike has had its damage reduced by 10%, alongside with the Flame Patch talent also having its damage reduced by 10%. Since you cannot have Flame Patch without Flamestrike, we will look at these two together. These changes will mostly affect Mythic Plus scenarios and not as much raids, since raids, even on fights like Sun King, Flamestrike is a much smaller part of the damage of Fire Mage, so much so that a 10% nerf is not going to change Fire Mage's performance in a way where its position in a raid will change. Not to mention that as far as raids go, the strength of fire is not in Flamestrike, regardless of how heavy the AoE fights are, since there are rarely fights where large HP pool adds in large numbers will consistently be a part of the encounter. Usually. But the changes are made to affect Mythic Plus performance. In dungeons, however, looking at the top mages, this seems to be anything from 3% to maybe 5% overall damage loss, with a margin of error of maybe 1% at most from Ignite losing some damage indirectly, although 1% Ignite damage loss is incredibly generous, since some rough Einstein math by looking at some top logs indicate a drop of around 0.3%, but I'm sure the Alter Time community would have proper numbers that will be crunched eventually. This nerf seems to be fair, nobody's surprised, and even with the nerf, the influx of gear and player power in future patches, supposing the numbers will not be touched anymore, Flamestrike would still pump Fire Mage pretty high, if not at the top, since its AoE is still uncapped. And one of the main contributors to this is the possibility of running an extra potency conduit due to the soulbinds opening up more, specifically Master Flame, that will negate a portion of the damage nerf. And the AoE of Flamestrike being uncapped is the actual catch as well. Uncapped AoE, aka burn packs larger than 8 mobs, since that's where the AoE cap reaches its minimum rigidity. And for the average player in a normal key, there will hardly be enough situations where your group can consistently fight more than 8 mobs at a time efficiently. This does indeed affect the echelon of M+ and MDI as well though. Moving on to Kindling, and here is where I have beef, and I think PREHEET's article on Wowhead puts a dot on the I pretty accurately. So Kindling has been nerfed to now provide a 1-second cooldown reduction from 1.5 seconds, which is the live version. This will affect raids more than anything, since in Mythic Plus you will hardly ever cast Combust on cooldown in high keys anyway, where this talent would be the most efficient. Unless you are fighting a long-ass tyrannical boss, of course. But as far as raids go, the reason this was so good is because it was lining up with the encounter design. The same reason why a lot of 1-minute burst DPSs were so good, and the best example is Sludge Fist. Every minute Sludge Fist takes 100% extra damage, meaning that every minute whoever had any sort of DPS cooldown will outperform those who did not. The best example to put side by side with Mage is Red Paladin, which has, outside of wings, a little 1-minute playstyle with 4 abilities and 1 trinket that would align every minute for maximum burst. This is also important because the way raids are designed now, raids have been designed for a while where most bosses, at least the difficult ones, have phases with either downtime added or damage increase. Check Stone Legion Generals, N'Zoth, even Jaina. Sludge Fist was already mentioned. As a consequence, they end up having phases where they can be damaged, and due to the nature of this design, you would want to pump as much damage as possible within that window. So, classes that are very strong during their DPS cooldown, aka having big burst damage, were very desirable. Ring any bells? Did you successfully guess Fire Mage? If you played Fire Mage for any amount of time, you will know that outside combustion, the damage is deplorable, at least from what the spec can do when you shift into high gear with a gas tank filled to the brim. Why did I go on this epic journey of waterboarding you with so much context and premise? Well, that's because this is supposed to point out that outside its damage, the content made Fire Mage really good, more so than raw damage output, in my opinion. Kindling is a fun talent and a cool mechanic you can find in other classes, and most DPS classes that have a talent that reduces their main source of damage cooldown will likely pick it. Now, Kindling made Combust align with those 1-minute windows. Now, it being nerfed makes Combust have a roughly 70 to 80 seconds cooldown. Unless the raid design favors classes that deal massive damage every minute and a half or so, this is next to useless, the talent that is. And BFA is the best example since Kindling became a thing in 8.3. Kindling had the same 1-second reduction per crit of the appropriate spells, but BFA had such a high influx of external power that Kindling only became good once Combust was around 1-minute cooldown if you picked the talent. Do you see a pattern here? This just in! Hi! I am Future Flame, coming into the past over past Flame shit to tell you about the Night Fade Legendary. Heart of the Fae has just been data mined on the PTR server, and it's, well, useless in this current version. What it does is it makes shifting power be castable while moving. Woo! And also gives you 1% crit and 1% haste, stacking up to 10% each for 10 seconds. The main issue with this is the numbers don't make it competitive. Shifting power being castable while moving is a good quality of life change, but the crit and haste cannot compare with the other options on the Fire Mage legendary list. Maybe if the numbers would be tuned a bit more, still too early to tell if this version will be the final iteration. But with that being said, I will go back to the future now and let past Flame do his shit. To be fair, I kinda wanna tell him not to eat that goddamn burrito, but if I had a shitty morning, he deserves one as well. Haha, logic, bye! And lastly, Infernal Cascade, the Conduit, has been nerfed to start granting 7% fire damage at rank 1 up to 16.8% at the max current rank. This is maybe the most substantial nerf across the board, and even with that, it amounts to a potential 1.5% DPS loss overall. And looking at how this particular conduit performs against other Fire Mage options, I guess it's fine. But then you have this, Flamestrike and Kindling, and all of them together. This is going to make the mages a bit more humble, although I am still unsure if it will knock them out of the park. Maybe they won't be number 1 anymore, Shadow, but I feel they can still be top of the meta, and with a strong emphasis on feel. Because right now fire is at the top of the meta. In raids with Kindling, Fire Mage's profile has more or less dealt with the majority of the bosses in Castle Nathria. Although this is a recent log based on the top performance of Mythic Nathria, fire is still not number 1. Yet the Kindling nerf might hurt it more than meets the eye. Maybe the Kindling nerf was a bit too much? With this in mind, I think PREHEET's argument about it stands on solid ground. Mostly because I am a strong supporter of fun before DPS although I often can be a hypocrite. The nerfs seem to most likely target Mythic Plus scenarios where, even though this current log shows only DPS, if we add healers and tanks to top performing specs in this ranking, Fire Mage is still reigning supreme above the mortals. Here the nerfs are a little more justified. For a rough idea, we can take a look at two kind of random logs for Fire Mages. Kind of in the sense that I only took two from the other side, because it was first alphabetically on Warcraft logs, but not really random since the first one is from Asuna, the arguably best performing Fire Mage in dungeons, and the second is from Walta, the best Fire Mage log on a 15 the other side. The reason for this is not all Fire Mages get to play at the level of Asuna, and probably Walta also, but it does paint a picture of how much damage Flamestrike and Flame Patch by extension, which is calculated together, do out of an entire overall damage profile when played by a proper mage. This is not 100% accurate for the point I want to make, but the framing works to underline that the nerfs, although significant to be felt, might not hurt the overall performance of Fire, since Fire is already knocking other specs out of the park by a huge mile, and the nerfs are likely to just make them more balanced, rather than underperforming. At least in the sense of Mythic Plus, where Fire's major strong suit is still its uncapped AoE and the ease of access to it as opposed to what other specs have. And the fact that Fire is so good and so many people have fun playing it should give the devs at least a hint of what we think about uncapped AoE. And by extension, capped AoE. I am all for uncapped AoE. Would be nice for more specs to have an easily accessible spell like Flamestrike that is uncapped, but hopefully baby steps. The first of which will be these nerfs that, despite me not liking over-dominating specs in the game, I don't fancy so much them being nerfed. I would rather have everybody else buffed to match Fire, but nerfs are always a part of the design. How much will they affect Fire? That's very unlikely to estimate correctly right now. The only real metric of comparison is to put these numbers in a 9.0.5 context and draw a conclusion. But as you may very well know if you played Fire Mage in the last few years, nerfs and buffs can become relative or even irrelevant from one patch to another when player power in the form of external systems will be added. In 9.1 you will have extra conduit slots, and 9.2 will likely add tier set bonuses on top of everything. This has been more of a general look from a multi-class nerd that dabbles into the game at an arguably average level. I recommend you check and stay updated with the Altered Time Discord for any accurate information on how these nerfs will affect you and any future changes to the spec to come, which are likely to happen. A special thank you to PREHEET as well. No, not that PREHEET from Limit, this PREHEET. This lad is a mad Fire Mage and helped us understand the status of the changes a bit better. If you want more in-depth Fire Mage content, more than what we can offer, check PREHEET's channel and even his website, cause... Wait, what the fuck is this shit? Oh my god, this looks pretty fucking badass, dude! Hot damn! And as always, thank you to the patrons for supporting our content. Obviously, we're not doing guides anymore, clearly, but these videos address the specs 9.1, and if you want to support us a little bit more, dear viewer, this is what you would be supporting, plus the mocast, plus the streams, plus the tier list. All of the information links are down below, as well as access to PREHEET's content. Thank you so much for watching the video, and see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.